Dear students, good evening and a warm welcome to CSAT Made Easy 2025 series, where we discuss the most exam specific questions and concepts for your CSAT paper of 2025 year, and I am Sachin Gopanal. Welcome once again. Today's topic would be reading comprehension. In reading comprehension, we will discuss specifically assumptions. What are assumptions and how do we solve the questions based on them? First, we will define what an assumption is. An assumption is something that the author has believed to be true. The author has believed to be true and which is evident from the passage. However, the author has not explicitly stated it. Let me repeat. An assumption is something which the author has believed to be true according to the passage. However, he has not explicitly stated it. What do I mean by that? We will understand this definition of assumption and what assumption exactly is by solving the problems. The first problem, it is a basic question. I will give you a background for this question. A bunch of my friends, we were discussing the pros and cons of one nation, one election policy. Some of the friends, they were arguing for the policy and some of them, they were arguing against the policy. During that argument, during that discussion, these are some of the arguments that came up and we are using them. Okay, look at what friend A says. He says, I support the initiatives that make the government more productive. So, I support one nation, one election policy. This is the passage. Now, look at the question. Based on the passage, A has made the following assumption. What are the assumptions? Option A. He should always support the initiatives that make the government more productive. Okay. One nation, one election policy makes the government more productive. Okay. It is his duty to support the government. Okay. It is his duty to support one nation, one election policy. Okay. Which is the answer here? Let's look at the options one by one. One other thing I should mention here is in reading comprehension, usually there will be conflict between two options. Usually you will be able to reject two options directly and you will face conflict between two options. Then you will choose that option which is most appropriate. Here you will choose the most appropriate answer if you are not able to arrive at the correct answer. While solving the problems that involve maths, it is easy to arrive at the correct answer. However, in reading comprehension, you will eliminate the incorrect one or the less appropriate ones. Then you will arrive at the most appropriate one, and we will use that method here. Okay, look at option A. He should always support the initiatives that make the government more productive. This is not the answer. I will tell you why. For two reasons. One, friend A has explicitly stated it that he supports the initiatives that makes the government more productive. So, he has stated outrightly. He has stated explicitly. So, it doesn't fit the criteria of assumption. And the other thing is, look at the word always. It is an extreme case. Usually, the extreme cases are not the answer unless it is specified so in the passage. Here, he merely mentions that he supports it. He does not say that he always supports it. There is a difference between them. When he says that I support it, he supports it most of the times. He does not mean that he always supports it. For these two reasons, we will reject option A. However, be lenient with the definition. Usually, especially in the UPSC CSAT paper, you will be needed to eliminate the answers more than arriving at the correct answer. So, use my definition of assumption. What is assumption? An assumption is something that the author has believed to be true but does not explicitly state it. Use it leniently. Don't use it rigidly. Eliminate the options which do not fit the definition. Then choose the option, the remaining one. That will be your answer. What do I mean by this? You will understand better as you go on to the next problems. Let's look at the second option. One nation, one election policy makes the government more productive. This seems very good. However, we will not mark it as a correct answer. We will go to third option. It is his duty to support the government. No, he has not mentioned it at all. He merely mentions that he supports the initiatives that make the government more productive. There is no mention of his duty. Okay, so we will reject option C. Look at option D. It is his duty to support one nation, one election policy. Again, there is a mention of duty. We will reject it. Why? There is no mention of duty, rights, duties. There is no such mention in the passage. Okay. Now we are left with only option B and that is our answer. And I will tell you why option B is the correct one actually. Rather than just eliminating, we could have directly landed on it. How? What does option B say? One nation, one election policy makes the government more productive. Now, this friend, what has he said? He says that he supports the initiative which make the government more productive, and he says that that is why he supports one election policy. So he has not, it appears that he believes one nation, one election policy, ONOE policy, to be one such policy which makes the government more productive. So he believes it. However, he has not explicitly stated it. Read the sentences carefully. He has not explicitly stated it. It appears that as though he has said it, he has not said it. He said that he supports those initiatives which make the government more productive. So he will support ONOE. However, he has not explicitly stated that ONOE is one such policy which makes the government more productive. He has not explicitly stated it, but we can understand it from the context, from the passage. So option B is our answer. Okay. Now we will look at another argument from another friend. Here friend C says, I oppose the initiatives that weaken the country's federal structure. So I oppose one nation, one election policy. Based on the passage, C has made the following assumption. There has not been a policy in the recent years that is as harmful as the country's as harmful to the country's federal structure as ONOE policy. There is no mention of other policies in the passage. So we will reject option A. Look at option B. ONOE may have its advantages, but its disadvantages outweigh them. There is no mention of other advantages or other disadvantages. There is only mention of ONOE affecting the country's federal structure. So we will reject option B also. Look at option C. ONOE does not weaken the country's federal structure. No. If option C were the answer, he would not be opposing them. Look at option D. ONOE weakens the country's federal structure. Yes, this is the answer. How is it the answer? Look at what friend C says. He says he opposes those initiatives which weaken the country's federal structure. He says that is why he opposes ONOE. So he believes that ONOE weakens the country's federal structure, and he has not explicitly stated it. An assumption is something that the author believes to be true but does not explicitly state it, and that fits our option D. So option D is our answer. Now I think you have a very good idea of what an assumption is. Now we will go to other questions. This is also an easy question. Food loss in India not only undermines national food security but also translate into substantial economic loss. So the government of India has taken commendable steps to improve logistics and cold chain infrastructure in recent years. Okay. Based on the passage, the author has made the following assumptions. Look at 1. Improvement in logistics and cold chain infrastructure prevents food loss completely. Look at assumption 2. Improvement in logistics and cold chain infrastructure reduces food loss. Both appear to be meaning the same. No. Why? Because of the assumption 1, it says prevents completely. Assumption 2, it says reduces. Okay. Let's get back to the passage. Food loss in India not only undermines national food security but also translate to substantial economic loss. So government of India has taken commendable steps to improve logistics and cold chain infrastructure. So the author seems to have assumed that by improving logistics and cold chain infrastructure, food loss in India can be reduced or can be prevented to some extent. So assumption 2 appears to be true. Either it can be prevented or it can be reduced to a good extent. However, option 1 is wrong. Assumption 1 is wrong because it mentions completely. That would be a very extreme case, and there is no such mention of extreme case in the passage. And it uses the word prevents completely. So it would be a very extreme case. So we will go with assumption 2 only. So your answer would be 2 only. Now we will go to exam level questions. Okay. Let's read the passage. This is your exam level question, and this is the length of the passage that you can expect in the actual examination. So we will use one technique to read this whole thing and keep it in our mind. What is it? Whenever we read a complete sentence or whenever we read a part of the passage which denotes one concept, we'll underline one term of it, so that when we read that term, we will be able to recall the entire sentence. Because when you read the question, when you read the assumptions given in the question, you will be wanting to read the whole passage. We need to avoid it, because reading the passage again and again, it would be very time consuming. What do I mean by this? You will understand when I solve this problem. Okay. Let's read the passage first. First, Kerala needs to work out disaster risk zones based on multiple criteria covering both physical and social components within a social ecological frame with the help of subject experts and generate permanent databases. What will I underline here? I will underline disaster risk zone. What are they talking about? They are saying that Kerala should identify disaster risk zones based on multiple criteria using physical and social components within their ecological frame with the help of subject experts, and they should create a permanent database. So, the whole thing I will denote it using the term disaster risk zones. Okay. As landslides and floods follow watershed boundaries, the disaster risk zones must be translated according to the watershed or river basins. What will I underline here? I will underline watershed boundaries. What about watershed boundaries? They are telling us that landslides and floods, they follow the watershed boundaries. So, the disaster risk zones, they must be translated according to watershed or river basins. So, I will underline watershed boundaries. It is not required that you underline the same keyword as me. You may underline whatever keyword that seems appropriate to you. Just underline that key term, which will help you recollect the whole thing. Okay, let's read on. Second, Kerala needs the people's participation in preparing risk maps. I will underline risk maps. Okay, it is important for Kerala to introduce a community-based disaster risk management in which at-risk communities are actively engaged in identifying, analyzing, planning, implementing, monitoring and evaluating disaster risk reduction initiative. What are they talking about? They are talking about community-based disaster risk management. So, I will underline this whole thing, community-based disaster risk management. A quadruple helix model involving community, social organizations, academy or research institutes, the government, business and industry will be useful. I will underline quadruple helix model. Now, I have read the entire passage and I have underlined key terms so that after reading the assumptions given in the question, if I want to look, if I want to read the passage back, I will identify which keyword is denoting the assumption and I will read only that sentence. I will not be needed to read the whole sentence. Okay. Let's look at the question now. Based on the passage, the author has made the following assumptions. By identifying its disaster risk zones and creating a disaster risk map, Kerala may be able to effectively manage its disasters. Okay, seems appropriate because the author is talking about disasters in Kerala and drawing disaster risk zones and maps. So, he must have assumed that by doing that, this thing can be avoided. Disasters can be avoided or they can be effectively managed. And this is not an extreme case. They have used the word may. Okay. So, we'll accept this as a valid assumption. Let's look at the second assumption. Kerala has been a disaster risk state historically. Okay. There is no mention of either past or future. They are talking about the present situation that Kerala is disaster. Kerala needs to effectively manage its disaster risks. There is no mention that Kerala has been historically a disaster hit state. However, we may assume that in the recent past, Kerala may be disaster risk state. We may assume that would be a valid assumption to state that right now or in the recent past, Kerala must have been Kerala might have been a disaster risk state. But to state that historically Kerala has been a disaster would be a very stretch of an argument. So, we will reject assumption 2 because there is no mention of history or Kerala being a disaster risk hit state historically. So, our answer would be 1 only. Now, let's go to next question. This is a homework question for you. This question, it was asked in 2023 paper. In India, the segregation of municipal waste at source is rare. Recycling is mostly with informal sector. More than 3/4 of the municipal budget goes into collection and transportation, which leaves very little for processing or resource recovery and disposal. Where does waste to energy fit into all this? Ideally, it fits in the chain after segregation between wet waste and the rest, collection, recycling and before getting to the landfill. Which technology is most appropriate in converting waste to energy depends on what is in the waste, that is biodegradable versus non-biodegradable component and its calorific value. The biodegradable component of India's municipal solid waste is a little over 50% and biomethanation offers a major solution for processing this. Based on this, they have given you two assumptions, assumption 1 and assumption 2. Read the assumptions and mark your answer. Leave your answer in the comment section. We will discuss the answer in the next class. Now it is time to discuss the answer for your previous class's homework problem. Previous class it was on set theory. So this was your homework. We will discuss the answer here. What is the question? In an examination, 80% of the students passed in English, 70% of the students passed in Hindi and 15% failed in both the subjects. What is the percentage of students who failed in only one subject? How do we denote it? We will denote this data in the Venn diagram. Okay, first we will take the data. English how many? English 80%. Hindi how many? Hindi 70%. And 15% failed in both the subjects. Where will we denote it? We will denote 15% outside the both the circles, because we will keep this circle for English and keep this circle for Hindi, and we will denote 15% outside both the circles. This is 15%. Now what is the question? What is the percentage of students who failed in only one subject? How do we answer that? To answer that, we need this intersection value. Why? Because we need to always fill intersection value first, so that we can space this, we can fill this and this space. Why? Because it is a rule of set theory that you should fill that number which is involved in more number of cases. Okay. How will we denote this? First, we will do one other thing. If 15% we are placing it outside the circles, that is 15% of the students have failed in both the subjects, here, here and here, the remaining 3 spaces, how much would it be? It would be 85%, right? Because this whole rectangle, it always denotes 100%. So if outside the circles we are denoting 15%, inside the circles, the sum of it would be 85%, and that would be union, right? Union of E and H, it would be 85%. We have discussed in the previous class. Okay, and we have a formula. What is the formula? The formula is E plus H. In this context, English plus Hindi is equal to union plus intersection. We denote intersection using inverse U. Okay, what is E? It is 80%. H, it is 70%. What is union? It is 85. We just want it out plus intersection. So 150 is equal to 85 plus intersection. 150 minus 85, that would be the value of intersection. How much would it be? 150 minus 85, that would be 65%. So 65% of the students, they have passed in both English and Hindi. Okay. What about English only? English, in 80% of the students have passed in English. So we have denoted 65 here already. So the remaining would be 15% here. Okay. And here, Hindi, 70% of the students have passed. So we have denoted 65 already here. So we will denote other 5% here. Okay. Now we got a complete picture. But what is the question? What is the percentage of students who have failed in only one subject? Okay, let's count them. This 15%, they have passed in English but failed in Hindi. So they have failed in one subject. Okay, we'll count it 15. This 65, they have passed in both the subjects. They have not failed at all. So we'll not consider it. 5%, they have passed in Hindi but failed in English. They have failed in one subject. So we'll count them 5. And 15%, they have failed in both the subjects. But we want the people who have failed in only one subject. So we'll not count them all. 15 plus 5, that would be 20. So 20% of the students have failed in only one subject. Okay. Now, if you like our classes, do watch them regularly. We upload one class every evening. Thank you, and most of all, happy studying.